Without another word, he answered the call, his voice cold and sharp. "What do you want?" As he listened to the voice on the other end, Amara could see the tension building in his body. Something was wrong, very wrong. When he hung up, his expression was unreadable, but the next words he spoke made Amara's blood run cold. "We need to leave. Now." Adrian's sharp command lingered in the air as Amara stared at him, her pulse racing. His entire demeanor had shifted in an instant. Gone was the guarded, calculating man who always kept his emotions under control. This was different. Urgency radiated from him, his posture tense as he prepared for something she couldn't yet understand. "Adrian, what's going on?" Amara asked, her voice laced with both confusion and fear. "I don't have time to explain," Adrian said, his tone colder than before. "We need to get out of here. Now." Amara swallowed hard, her mind racing. She wanted answers, why they had to leave so suddenly, why he was acting this way, but she knew better than to push him right now. The intensity in his eyes told her that something serious was happening, something beyond her understanding. Without another word, Adrian started the car again, his foot slamming on the gas as they sped down the road. Amara clutched the seatbelt, trying to steady her nerves, but the unease in the pit of her stomach only grew stronger with every mile. The drive felt endless, and the tension between them suffocated the car. Adrian barely spoke, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes focused on the road. He drove like a man possessed, as if something or someone was chasing them. Amara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something sinister was looming just beyond the shadows. Finally, after what felt like hours, Adrian pulled the car into a hidden driveway far outside the city. The house in front of them was secluded, surrounded by dense trees, with not a single neighbor in sight. It was unlike anything she had expected, a stark contrast to the lavish world Adrian usually inhabited. He killed the engine and stepped out, motioning for Amara to follow. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly as she looked around at the isolated surroundings. "A safe house," Adrian said, his voice clipped. "We'll be staying here for a while." "Staying here?" Amara's heart pounded in her chest. "Adrian, what's going on? Why are we here? Why didn't you tell me about this?" Adrian's eyes flashed with impatience, but there was something else in them too, something like concern. "I told you before, you're involved in my world now. Things are starting to move faster, and I can't afford to take risks. Especially not with you." Amara crossed her arms, her frustration boiling over. "You keep saying that, about your world, about control, but I don't know what any of this means. What am I supposed to do with all these half-truths, Adrian?" His eyes locked onto hers, the tension between them crackling. "You're supposed to trust me." Amara let out a bitter laugh. "Trust you? How can I trust someone who keeps pulling me deeper into something I don't understand? You've done nothing but manipulate me, make me a part of your schemes." Adrian stepped closer, his eyes darkening. "I've kept you safe." "Safe from what?" She shot back, her frustration finally spilling over. "From other women? From people like Liam? Or is there something bigger going on that you're not telling me?" For a moment, Adrian didn't respond, his jaw tightening as he stared at her. But then, something shifted in his gaze. The hardness melted away, replaced by an emotion she hadn't seen before. Something raw, something real. "I can't let them hurt you, Amara," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand the stakes. These aren't just business deals. There are people, dangerous people, who are watching me, watching you." Amara's blood ran cold. She had suspected there was more to Adrian's life than he had let on, but she hadn't realized it was this serious. "Who are these people?" she asked, her voice trembling. Adrian didn't answer right away. He turned, running a hand through his hair as if trying to gather his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and filled with barely contained tension. "Competitors, rivals, people who want what I have, and they'll do anything to get it." Her heart raced. "And what do they want from me?" "They think you're important to me," Adrian said, his eyes meeting hers again. "They've seen you with me at these events, and now they believe you're a weakness they can exploit." Amara's breath caught in her throat. "So, I'm just a pawn in your game? A liability?" "No," Adrian said quickly, stepping closer. "It's not like that. You're not a pawn, Amara. I didn't expect things to get this complicated, but now that they have, I have to protect you." His words sent a chill through her, but at the same time, something inside her stirred. There was more to Adrian than she had realized. He wasn't just the playboy billionaire she had thought him to be. There was something deeper, something dangerous, and now she was caught in the middle of it. Amara took a step back, trying to process everything. "What do we do now?" Adrian exhaled slowly, his expression softening. "We lay low for a few days. I need to figure out who's behind the threats. In the meantime, I need you to trust me. I can't lose control of this." Amara nodded, her mind still racing. Trust. It was a word that had been thrown around too much between them, and she wasn't sure she could give it freely. But what choice did she have? She was in too deep now. The next few days passed in a blur. Adrian kept them hidden at the safe house, with minimal contact from the outside world. The isolation was unnerving, but there was an undeniable sense of safety here, away from the prying eyes of Adrian's world. Still, the tension between them remained. Adrian was distant, brooding. He spent most of his time on the phone or pacing the house, trying to figure out who was behind the threats. Amara tried to keep herself busy, but the weight of their situation hung heavily on her. She wanted answers, but Adrian wasn't offering much. One evening, after hours of silence, Amara found herself sitting by the fireplace, lost in thought. Adrian entered the room, his expression guarded as always, but there was something different in his eyes. He hesitated for a moment before sitting down across from her. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly, his voice uncharacteristically soft. Amara looked up, surprised by a sudden change in tone. "An explanation?" He nodded, leaning forward slightly. "I haven't been completely honest with you about why I brought you into this. I didn't think it would get this complicated, but now, I can't afford to keep you in the dark." Amara's heart pounded in her chest. She had been waiting for this, waiting for Adrian to finally tell her the truth. "So, tell me, Adrian exhaled slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. I brought you to these events because I needed a way to deflect attention. People were watching me closely, trying to find a weakness, and I thought if I kept them focused on you, I could handle things behind the scenes. So, I was just a distraction, Amara said, her voice tight. At first, yes, Adrian admitted, his voice soft. But then things changed. You weren't just a distraction anymore. You became more than that. Amara's heart skipped a beat at his words, the air between them growing thick with tension. She wasn't sure what he meant, but the way he was looking at her now, there was something new, something intense in his gaze. Adrian, she whispered, unsure of what to say. But before she could continue, the sound of a car pulling up outside cut through the silence. Adrian's expression immediately hardened, and he stood, his eyes narrowing as he glanced toward the window. Stay here, he ordered, his voice sharp as he moved toward the door. Amara's heart pounded in her chest as she watched him go. Something was wrong, very wrong. She stood, her pulse racing, as Adrian stepped outside. The seconds ticked by like hours, and then she heard it. Voices. Raised, angry voices. Amara's blood ran cold as she moved toward the window, her breath catching in her throat when she saw who was standing outside with Adrian. It was Liam. Amara's heart lurched as she watched the confrontation unfold. Liam's expression was tight with anger, his eyes fixed on Adrian as the two men exchanged heated words. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but the intensity between them was unmistakable. Why was Liam here? What did he want? And most importantly, what was he about to do? Amara's breath caught in her throat as she watched the confrontation unfold outside the safe house. Adrian and Liam stood just a few feet apart, their expressions hard and unyielding. She could see the tension in Adrian's posture, the way his hands were clenched at his sides as though he was trying to keep himself from doing something he might regret. Liam, on the other hand, looked equally furious, his eyes blazing with anger as he spoke. Amara couldn't hear what they were saying, but the intensity between them was undeniable. What was Liam doing here? How had he found them? And more importantly, what did he want? She pressed her hand to the cold glass, her heart racing. She had no idea what she was supposed to do. Should she intervene? Stay hidden? Every instinct told her that whatever was happening between Adrian and Liam, it was about to reach a boiling point. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Adrian stormed inside, his eyes flashing with barely contained fury. He slammed the door shut behind him, his chest rising and falling as though he was trying to control his breathing. Amara took a step back, startled by the raw emotion in his eyes. "Adrian, what's going on?" she asked cautiously, her voice trembling. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He ran a hand through his hair, his jaw clenched as he paced the room like a caged animal. His entire body was taut with frustration, and Amara could sense that whatever had just happened with Liam had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. Finally, he turned to face her, his expression hard. "Liam's out there," he said flatly. "I know," Amara replied, her heart pounding. "I saw him. Why is he here?" Adrian's eyes narrowed. "He thinks he can take you away." Amara blinked, the words hitting her like a punch. Take me away? Adrian let out a bitter laugh, his eyes flashing with anger. He thinks I'm holding you here against your will. That I'm manipulating you. Amara's chest tightened. She had never told Liam the full truth about her situation with Adrian, but she hadn't expected him to jump to such drastic conclusions. She had been worried about Liam getting involved, but this was something else entirely. I didn't ask him to come, she said quickly. I had no idea he'd find us. Adrian's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she thought he might lash out. But then something in his expression shifted, the anger giving way to something else, something deeper. He thinks you're in danger, Adrian said quietly, his voice softening just enough for Amara to notice. And I can't help but wonder if part of you believes that too. Amara's heart ached at his words. She had never felt truly unsafe with Adrian, not physically at least, but there were moments when she questioned his control over her life, the way he made decisions for her without asking. Still, Liam didn't understand what was really happening, and his sudden involvement had only made things worse. I don't think you're dangerous, Adrian, she said softly, stepping closer. But I don't know why Liam would come here unless he thinks you need saving, Adrian finished for her, his voice laced with frustration. Amara looked up at him, her emotions swirling. She didn't need saving. Not from Adrian, and not from the mess her life had become. But she also couldn't ignore the way Adrian had been acting lately. The possessiveness, the control. There was a part of him that scared her, but there was also a part of him that she had started to understand. Maybe even sympathize with. Why are you so angry? She asked, her voice quiet but insistent. Is it just because Liam is here? Or is it something else? Adrian's eyes flashed, and for a moment, she thought he might shut her out again. But then he surprised her. I don't like how he looks at you, Adrian admitted, his voice low but filled with intensity. Like he knows you, like he can take you away from me. Amara's breath caught in her throat. The raw honesty in his words was startling, and she wasn't sure how to respond. Adrian, I'm not yours to control. Something flickered in his eyes, something like vulnerability, though it was quickly masked by his usual guarded expression. I know that, he said quietly, his voice strained. But it doesn't change the fact that I can't stand the thought of losing you. Not now. Amara's heart raced. Was that what this was? Was Adrian afraid of losing her? The idea seemed impossible. He had always been so distant, so detached. But now, standing this close to him, she could see it. The struggle in his eyes, the way he fought against his own emotions. For the first time, she realized that Adrian wasn't just angry. He was conflicted. You can't lose something you don't have, she said softly, meeting his gaze. Adrian's jaw clenched, and for a moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice so quiet she almost didn't hear it, he said, Maybe I don't want that to be true. The admission hung in the air between them, thick with unspoken meaning. Amara's heart raced as she tried to make sense of what he had just said. Was this Adrian's way of admitting that he felt something for her? That she was more than just a pawn in his game? But before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Adrian stiffened immediately, his eyes narrowing as he moved toward the door. It's him, he muttered under his breath. Amara's pulse quickened as Adrian opened the door, revealing Liam standing on the other side. His expression was tight, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and anger as he looked past Adrian to Amara. "We need to talk," Liam said, his voice firm. "Alone." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Whatever you have to say to her, you can say in front of me." Liam's eyes flashed with irritation. "This doesn't concern you, Adrian." Adrian took a step forward, his posture tense. "Everything that happens here concerns me." Amara stepped between them, her heart racing. She could feel the hostility building between the two men, and the last thing she wanted was for this to escalate. "Stop it," she said, her voice trembling. "Both of you." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Amara turned to Liam, her voice calmer now. "Liam, why are you here?" Liam's expression softened slightly, his eyes filled with concern as he looked at her. "Amara, I'm here because I'm worried about you. This isn't the life you should be living. You don't belong here with him." Adrian bristled at Liam's words, but Amara held up a hand, stopping him before he could respond. "Liam, I appreciate that you care," she said quietly, choosing her words carefully. "But this isn't something you can fix. My life isn't the same as it was before." "You don't have to stay with him," Liam insisted, his voice rising with emotion. "You have other options." Amara's chest tightened. She wished it were that simple. But she couldn't just walk away from Adrian, not with everything that had happened, not with the weight of her family's debt still hanging over her head. And then there was the undeniable truth she hadn't wanted to face. She was starting to care about Adrian in a way that made her feel more confused than ever. "I can't leave," Amara said, her voice shaking slightly. "Not yet." Liam's face fell, but before he could argue, Adrian spoke. "She's made her choice," Adrian said, his voice calm but firm. "It's time for you to leave." Liam's jaw tightened, his eyes filled with frustration. "This isn't over, Amara," he said softly before turning to leave. Amara watched him go, her heart heavy with guilt and confusion. She didn't know what she was supposed to do. Liam had been her connection to her old life, a reminder of who she used to be. But now, standing here with Adrian, she realized that everything had changed. She had changed. Adrian closed the door, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the situation hung over them, thick and suffocating. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. "You don't have to explain yourself to him." Amara looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Why do you care so much?" Adrian's eyes darkened, his voice quiet but intense. "Because I can't stop thinking about you, Amara, even when I know I shouldn't." Her heart skipped a beat. There it was, the truth he had been fighting against, the truth she had been waiting for. "But you don't want to feel that way," she said softly, realizing it for herself as much as for him. Adrian's jaw clenched, and he took a step closer, his eyes locked onto hers. "No." "But I do." The tension between them crackled in the air, heavy with unspoken words and emotions. Amara's pulse raced as Adrian took another step closer, the space between them disappearing. She could feel the intensity of his gaze, the way he fought against his own feelings. And just as she thought he might say something more, the phone in Adrian's pocket buzzed, shattering the moment. Adrian's expression hardened as he glanced at the screen, his eyes narrowing. "We're not done here," he said quietly before answering the call, his voice sharp. "What is it?" But as he listened to the person on the other end, his expression grew darker, more dangerous. When he hung up, he turned to Amara, his voice grim. "We have a bigger problem than I thought."